Today's edition of Tech Tuesday by Full Sail University. Today's discussion, mobile apps, the software we carry with us everywhere. I am Luis Garcia, Vice President of Emerging Technologies at Full Sail University. Today we have a great panel of Full Sail University graduates. First we have Mr. Daniel Tavares. He's the Principal Software Engineer at Zynga, involved in projects like Words on Tour, Words with Friends, Battlestone, Wild Needle, Roblox. We also have Miss Heather Baker, a software engineer at InspiringApps, where she does Android and iOS development for fitness and social media. And last but not least, my friend Derek Bertubin, lead front-end engineer at Chopra Global, but also with extensive experience with brands like Universal, Orlando Magic, the Florida Gators. And I'm going to call each of your names to give us a few words of our introduction. So I'm going to start with you, Daniel. Where are you right now and what are you working on?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. And I'm in San Francisco. I currently and have been working for Zynga for the past 8.5 years, getting close to 9 now. And I currently work on a game that some of you may know called Words with Friends.
Thank you, Daniel. And Heather, and where are you and what are you working on right now?
So I am in Central Florida area, and the company I work for is based out of Boulder, Colorado. So that's a lot of fun to be able to work with the tech industry across the country. And right now I'm working on a team that is consulting with a major financial company on a white label mortgage application.
Thank you. And Derek, where are you and what are you working on?
Sure, and thank you for having me. I'm in Orlando, not too far from the Full Sail campus. I'm currently at Chopra, and basically I've been there since this May. And right now we're just adding new features to help users with their mindfulness and meditation practices.
That sounds really interesting. Thank you, Derek. So thank you everyone for your introduction. We will go over some questions for the first 30 minutes, and then we'll go to audience questions. For all of you guys that are watching, please submit your questions via the comments of Facebook, and our team will pass those to us. We'll start addressing those in the second half of our cast today, in the second half hour. So let's dive right in. I always like to start with some definitions to frame our conversation. A mobile app application, or mobile app for short, is a software application designed to run in a mobile device such as a smartphone or a tablet. The most popular mobile devices run either of two platforms of operating systems. They run either iOS from Apple, or they run Android from Google. The same mobile app cannot actually run in both. Which is something that people may not know. When they have an app that they download in one platform or the other, there are different builds. It is estimated that there are over 14 billion with a B mobile devices in the world right now, and they're being adding about 1 billion devices each year. It's a very large marketplace. It's the largest, perhaps the largest computing marketplace in the world. So for you guys in the panel, I'd like to ask you, why did you decide to become a mobile developer? And what is the most challenging aspect of developing software for mobile devices? And I'll start with you, Heather.
Okay, so the reason I started is I have always been fascinated with mobile technology. I grew up as a Trekkie. So they had the mobile communicators, and that was the first thing that sparked my interest. And then Google eventually came out with the G1, and that was the closest thing that I was going to get so far. So I started playing with them, rooting them, seeing what else the operating systems could do. And then when I finally had the chance to go to school, it was only natural that there is a mobile development degree. That's what I'm going to do. That's what I do in my spare time. And what?
Most challenging part of being a developer?
The most challenging thing is as the technology and the libraries are constantly changing. So every year or 6 months, a new device comes out, and you have to tailor what you're doing to that. So if you're working on the same application for, say, a couple of years, you're going through multiple iterations of different technology that you have to adapt that for. So it's definitely something that's constantly challenging along the way.
All right, Daniel, why did you decide to become a mobile developer? What's the most challenging aspect of developing software for mobile devices?
So I really, at the time, I really wanted to get involved with mobile development with an emerging platform. This is, I want to say, somewhere around 2009 or 10, I believe. And it was somewhat in the beginnings of all this market that you just mentioned that has billions and billions of devices across the globe. And I've always had this interest in technology and games specifically in my case, right? And then this nascent platform was really intriguing for me, and kind of that lured me into it. And then the challenging aspect. Well, I'll echo what Heather said in terms of the constant evolution of them, and then there's also the fact that you have a huge diversity of sizes and devices and emissions, and that just adds a lot of complexity to it. And you can't, there's no one size fits all, and then there's also a very large number of different requirements in terms of what is the lowest minimum spec that you target your application for, and you name it. And then it's like you can slice and dice in multiple ways, and then all that makes it a very complicated problem to tackle.
That's great. Thank you, Daniel. And Derek, why did you decide to become a mobile developer? And what do you think is the most challenging aspect of developing software for mobile?
Cool. So I always had a creative streak. Music was my first method of expression of that creativity. But as I got a little bit older, and it was around 2008, 2009, recession was happening. Music, nobody was paying for music at the time, at least in my circles. So, and I had a daughter, so I wanted something more secure. So I had made a list of things I wanted out of my career, and I kind of like put it aside, kind of let it go. And then one day, a really close friend, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, I want you to check this out. I think you'll be good at it." I never really programmed before. I didn't realize that I was really into technology, but it ended up being true because I was real deep in the jailbreaking scene. It was like the best thing ever to me. When I went to the presentation for the degree, it checked off every single box on that list. And at that point, I knew that, I had enough grit to get through. So I just went head in. And the most challenging aspect, at least for developing software for mobile devices, at least for me, just like Heather said, technology changes exponentially. It just gets faster and faster, and it's constant struggle of keeping up. Devices are changing, so iOS is slowly becoming like Android as far as like device size fragmentation and all of that. But for us, and recently, it's really just being able to understand the user, and as well as how and where they're going to be using your app, and what that user experience is going to be like. Like you mentioned before, desktop software, it's pretty simple. You're at a desk, you have a very streamlined use case, but you'll be surprised, at least I'm surprised, on how many different ways and places, users end up using the software that I work on.
That's pretty awesome. We're gonna get deeper into that part of the of the development. I want to remind everyone that's watching us that you can submit your questions via the comments in Facebook, and our team will send those to us, and we will be addressing those in the second part of our cast today. So 14 billion devices. I was very surprised when I saw that number, because that's a lot more than people. in the world. And software is very different than traditional software, because historically software was written to be run isolated from people. It used to be only used by particular users that had access to computers. And the internet and the PCs changed that, because a lot more people could use software, but still you had to physically move to a computer to use software. Devices make software hyper personal. Uh, the, so the machine moves with you, becomes an extension of you, even gets to know you. And it's a very particular, it makes everything a lot more personal. So as a software developer, how do you use this deep personal relationship between your users and the software you write? I'll start with you, Derek.
I had a feeling you were going to start with me. Yeah, I was thinking about this question a lot, and at first pass, I really didn't know how to answer it. But when it comes down to it, realizing that a user has a deep, or at least would like a deep personal relationship with their applications, it has become this like guiding compass. And that's one thing, a practice that I learned from school at Full Sail, and even in the masters, the innovation and entrepreneurship masters, is to really try to put yourself in the user's shoes. Understanding things like user personas is great in the beginning, but being able to create a feedback loop and learning from your users is ultimately the best way to keep that relationship strong. And interestingly enough, software, like you mentioned, ends up being exactly that, a personal extension. And so it's always good for us as developers to remember that the application we're creating is a portal in which a person expresses themselves. So everything I do, code, user experience, solutions, everything is based on how does it affect the relationship of the app to the user and what that experience is going to be like.
Heather, for you, how do you use the deep personal relationship between the users and the software you write?
I think definitely, like Derek was saying, that having that, or knowing that they're having that relationship, it really puts in the forefront of your mind at every single step the user experience of what's going on with what you're creating. And so as a developer, your first gut might be to get this ticket done and move it on and go on to the next one. But as somebody who's thinking about that deep personal relationship, you have to think about the context that they're going to use that app in. So you have to think that, well, this button might be just fine while I'm sitting here at my desk, but if they're working out while they're using this, maybe I need to make the text a little bit bigger or something like that. And it's important to go ahead and have that conversation, bring it up as an issue rather than just getting it done and putting it out, because that could be the difference between somebody having a frustrating workout or having a good time going on with their day and having a good day. And because of that relationship, people can actually change their entire mood from the way that an app treats them. And it's kind of crazy to think about.
That's awesome. Love that example. Thank you for sharing that. Daniel, in your side, even imagine in games may be even different for mobile applications because of this deep personal relationship that we're talking about. So how do you use this relationship in your software development?
Well, these relationships are in many ways the core of what Words with Friends is, right? This is I would say a 10-year-old game and going strong with millions of users playing it every single day. And it's all about the interaction between them and how is it that you provide entertainment of value that will keep them engaged and will keep them playing the game and actually keeping that relationship between their friends thriving and alive and fun. So we keep that as sort of one of the, if not the main pillar of it, is what is it that will provide the most engagement, and what is it that our players will thank us for. As a matter of fact, we actually have this saying at Zynga that you want to make sure that whatever everything you're doing is, you want to make sure that your players will be happy, and then will be a reason for them to thank us. So I think that we keep it at our head as every day, everything we do.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Uh, uh, I was commenting before we started the webcast that something that I realized as a software developer, as I was researching for today's show, is that as a traditional software developer, you don't get a lot of input into your programming. You get the text-based input from a user, or maybe some um, points for buttons and things like that. And in very extreme cases, you may have a device that you connect to bring something in, or a database. Uh, and I knew this, but I guess it didn't dawn on me until I was doing the research that the mobile devices provides you a lot of input, more input than you can even imagine in the same box. You got a camera, you got a microphone, you got an accelerometer, you got a GPS, you got also the traditional, input from keyboard and screen interaction. But this is a lot more than developing for other computing platforms, and it gives you the ability to write software for many purposes and to solve many problems. And so I was wondering if you can share an example of an innovative app that recently surprised you. I'll start with you, Heather.
So I was thinking about this one, and I feel like it's not fair to point out just one app, because it's the use of the technology that's surprising me, and in an awesome way, with the way that augmented reality is being brought to mobile. Because these apps are using the camera, the accelerometer, the GPS, the GPU, all in unison to make shared augmented reality experiences between two devices, which is something that we've never seen before. And so there's a lot of even like smaller apps, because of developers that are experimenting with the technology and seeing what can be done with it, that are probably showing it off the best, like these small little games that's a single developer just playing with that technology. There's a lot of really big ones that have done it too, though. There's Minecraft, like the Wizards Unite, Pokemon Go, and they're really just taking advantage of all of that technology that we have in the mobile device to bring just a crazy experience that we could have never done before.
How's Minecraft using it? Are people walking around while they play?
You can be, right. So you can have multiple iPads and have a shared experience, say in the park where you're building something in 3D in front of you.
That's super cool.
Pretty awesome.
Daniel, can you share an example of an innovative app that recently surprised you?
Yes. That one might be a short and quick answer, but let's go. Let's see. I was actually recently surprised with the health app on iOS that I've never used it until a week or two ago that I started poking around it, and I was drilling down to the different sections that they have in there, and it's amazing the level of detail and or the types of measurements that they can do based on just the sensors that you just described. One of them that caught my attention was that they actually measure your stride, how long your steps are, and then they assign some sort of grade to it to determine whether you're healthy or not. They'll say that, for example, if you happen to have a problem with one of your legs, then you're going to take a longer step with one leg or the other, or you might take. So it's just that alone was pretty impressive to think about that. And then they have a little description underneath that. This is measured by keeping your phone around your waist and then walking around. So that was one that really caught my attention there.
Wow, that catches my attention too. Derek, can you share an example of an innovative app that recently surprised you?
Yeah, sure. And actually, mine's very similar to Daniel's. There's an app I was looking for. Well, actually, somebody had pointed this app out to me as a feature that we might be able to, in the future, implement in the Chopra app. But I started researching it, and it was a HVR, heart rate variability, or HRV, heart rate variability measuring app, And it started off as that. You could use the camera on the back to basically measure your heart rate, and there was so much data that came from that camera reading. And then just recently they added Apple Watch support, and it tells you so much detail about like your stress levels, and recently they made a pretty sizable update to their main screen, and you just have this feed, and every once in a while I'll say, yeah, you're too stressed, you should take a deep breath, and it's going off those heart reading. And not only does it go off your Apple Watch, or it tracks your sleep, it leverages the APIs in the health app, and it gives you a lot of insight. And then I was noticing that as well, Daniel, on Runkeeper. It gave me a tracking of my stride. I was like, how in the world does it know that? But fortunately, I didn't have too much offset. The last app is Quibi. I don't know if you guys have actually downloaded the app, but it's a new media outlet. The cool thing about Quibi that really it really sparked how interesting or creative cinematographers and movie makers can get is that Quibi allows you to view the video portrait or landscape, and actually has different aspect ratios and different focal points depending on how you rotate the app, right, or the device. Well, just recently they had a movie, a series it's effectively a movie broken up in like 8-minute bits, but you could turn the phone in portrait mode and you could see what the guy is doing on his phone, and you turn it in landscape and you see the movie. And the movie is about this how youth today are addicted to their phones, and it causes danger and issues. But that was really cool. So Quibi and Welltory are the two really innovative apps that have surprised me recently.
Thank you. It's actually very interesting that they will showcase different points of view of the story depending on the positioning of the phone. We started to get some questions, which is great because we're about 8 minutes out from the bottom of the hour. And if you guys out there want to continue to send questions, please continue to do so. Before then, I have another question for you. And this one is a big one because it has to do with something that is in everybody's mind, and there's a lot of debate about privacy on phones. And one side, Apple has taken a very strong stance on privacy, and they heavily create apps in the store. And so you submit your app for approval of the Apple Store, and sometimes it can take days before they approve it and it's available to your users. And the other side, Google has a lot less restrictions for the Android marketplace, but that comes with a trade-off of not really looking for security issues as much and privacy. So all of you guys develop applications with big user bases. So how do you protect the privacy of your users in your applications? I'll start with you, Daniel.
You encrypt everything? Yeah, well, there's that. There's multiple layers that you can look at that, right? There's this technical aspect of encrypting things, and also even limiting the amount of data that you collect so that you don't have any problems with it. But see the specifics. Well, there's the even in terms of implementation, when you have different services in isolation, then that actually might even give you an extra layer of security there, so that if one service gets compromised, then another one may not, or you may be able to notice that a little earlier. Implementing latest and greatest approaches to to security. And for example, or not we are, but Apple is pushing their single or their sign-on authentication on their devices that then tightens and integrates that more with their system. And then you mentioned, well, Google might be a less restrict, but at the end of the day, they all have their concerns, and they try to keep privacy under control, even though they kind of take very different approaches, right?
So, Heather, how about you? How do you protect the privacy of your users in your applications?
So working on an app that is used for hundreds of thousands of users in finance, that's something that we have to think about on a constant basis. So, I mean, just like Daniel was saying, like you encrypt everything. And it comes down further even to, should I encrypt this or should I not encrypt this? Do I even need to make this encryption reversible? Or do I just need to check later and see if it's the same thing? Because that can be the difference in a hacker being able to get into it. So especially since I work on the Android platform, with it having less security on the platform itself, we really have to think about that, because saving some data where the initial thought would be that only our application can access it, there's known backdoors into it that hackers can use. So for example, this came up just the other day that we needed to save a username to be able to view it in another view within the app. And rather than being able to just simply save it and pass it over to the next view, we ended up having to encrypt that in an irreversible thing, and then be able to check against it, rather than just save it and pass it through the easy way, to make sure that if you as the user didn't say I could save your username, that I'm not saving it. And so rather than something that normally in development would take maybe a couple minutes to implement, it was something that was a process of writing that encryption algorithm and then moving everything over. But in the end, we know that we don't have to worry about our user safety.
Well, thank you for that example. That's actually really cool as well. And Derek, for you, how do you protect the privacy of your users in your applications?
Cool. In my last life, when I was at Venue Next, we handled venue commerce. So any mobile food ordering at theme parks, stadiums, coliseums, and things like that. So that's how I got my experience with like Universal and the Orlando Magic. But there's a lot of monetary transactions there, and in that, there's always somebody looking to try to exploit some issue. And then with that mindset, knowing that, hey, you're dealing with money, you're dealing with people's credit cards and things like that, you really have to make sure that you follow best practices. Sometimes you have to let third parties do what they do best to reduce your liability, PCI compliance and other types of information that you don't want to be leaked. You let them handle it. Another thing is, before, like I mentioned before, before I started the journey of being a developer, I was really into that jailbreaking scene. So I would really look at how things were exploited, and that knowledge kind of reminds me of, okay, if I'm storing any type of data, is it something accessible through a jailbreak exploit in the file structure or something like that? Am I storing passwords in a plain text file that can be read if somebody jailbroke or exploited a phone? The other thing is, and this is something that was called to my attention recently, is just reducing your reliance on things that are notorious for tracking personal information, like Google's their frameworks, their analytics frameworks. Google has done a really good job of making it so easy to use. In turn, they get all of this data, and so that is just an extra layer when you are doing any type of analytics type of stuff, to keep in mind is, you're tracking it for your own use to make the product better, but you're also giving it to Google, and somehow they're going to make a connection to this user. And you may be inadvertently leaking this out for other people to profit off of. And then the final thing is just best, just standard development best practices, leverage keychains, secure keychains, definitely follow Apple's guidelines and Android's guidelines when dealing with sensitive information. And it may be worth it to pay a third party to do penetration testing on your entire system, because the app is one thing, the back end is a completely other thing. I've seen an instance where a CI/CD runner or a machine got exploited, and it had access to all the builds. So there's so many different ways, and you really just have to try to think like Mr. Robot or something like that, like you're trying to hack into the system as much as possible.
I think you brought a great example there. Is not all the data is on the phone, and some of the data is being stored somewhere else, and that system can also be vulnerable. So perhaps bringing some experts to try to break it all is a good investment. So I have a couple of questions here from the audience already, as we are turning into the second half of our show today. One has to do with, we get this question a lot from early developers. So there was a day that neither of you knew how to program, and you probably went through your trials and tribulations. And what would you advise somebody that is taking up on programming, and on how to overcome the challenges and keep themselves in a trajectory to make a living as a programmer? And I'll start with you, Heather.
So I think the thing that helped me the most when I was first starting, and it still helps me to this day, is keeping that curiosity. Because especially when you're first starting, you're going to run into so many seemingly dead ends. And it can be really frustrating if you let it be. But they're not dead ends. It just means that you might need to pull your research in a different direction. And so keeping that curiosity of, okay, it's not working like this, let me look up how it does work, I think is really important to be willing to spend your time and also code every day, even if it's something as simple as a hello world. To keep your brain thinking in that way is really important, especially when you're first starting.
That's really good. I tell people you have to develop thinking in loops. It has to come natural to you. That's awesome. I love that one. Daniel, for you, what would you advise to somebody that is starting to take on programming and to have a best trajectory to success?
Dedication is one thing that I can think of that's very important, right? And then you want to also be very focused on what is it that you're trying to achieve, and then make sure that everything you do kind of is a step towards that goal. And if you're trying to get a job as an engineer, as a programmer, then you want to make sure that you're able to actually show that, so that when time comes that you need to show, and there's an interview, for example, then there's material for you to present, either because you went to a school, you went to full sail, got a degree, or that you actually did projects on the side and have a portfolio to present. It's important to know that, to be able to show that you know how to create and write the software. And nowadays, we're talking about the whole thing with what is very impressive with the phones and whatnot, and being able, just the fact that you have access to the internet, then you have the world's information at your disposal. So it's all about you having the dedication and the grit to dedicate the time and learn, so that you can eventually achieve your goal.
That's great. And we have another question about how to keep ourselves informed, but I'll get to that in a second. Derek, what would you advise somebody that wants to take on programming and to avoid the pitfalls and become successful?
Cool. So one of the things that Daniel just mentioned is something that I kind of speak on a lot, especially to people who are starting out, either through like the Facebook networking group, or just in my friends who ask me, hey, how do I do what you do? The first thing is grit. That's 100% the the core ingredient to taking on something new that you have never done before and to be successful at it. And without that, I just happen to be a gritty person already. And without that, the humps may have been much harder for me to overcome. When I went to my first programming class, I failed it. And I was trying to find my grades. I think I failed the first programming class twice, just because it was such a shock to my mind. But I knew that I could get this, like I'm going to get it. And I used to say there's, when you bang your head against the wall, there's one of two things that are going to happen. You're going to break your head or you're going to break the wall. And I always chose to break the wall. And I refused to allow it to break my head. So that's one thing, just grittiness. I was kind of saving this for another part of what I was going to share, but I'll share it now, is that also network early. Start reaching out, start branching out, start going to meetups, virtual meetups, coming to things like this type of, this type of panel. Learn as much as you can, but really make the connections in the industry as early on as possible. And I'll share a real close story to me. A Full Sail student, a year before he was graduating, came out to our dev shop. Heather was a part of that. And, he really put, he was, putting the student group out there, but he kept in touch. He kept up to date with what we were doing. And, I ended up hiring him, I went to his final project that impressed me, which goes to another point that Daniel made, is showing your portfolio. But it really sealed the deal for me, at least. And then we hired him. He started a week after he graduated. So it really pays off to be persistent, to network. If nobody knows what you're doing, then nobody's going to even look for you to do it, And then the final thing is just, keep that imposter syndrome in check, because that may prevent you from putting yourself out there. You always have to start at the bottom. You will be surrounded by people who know a lot more than you. Do not see it as a challenge to your ego or to prevent you or allow you to be shy or, or be afraid to be wrong, because those are the people that are going to elevate you and you're going to learn from, and you have to embrace that. So those are my main things.
Those are great things, Derek. Thank you so much for sharing so much wisdom. For those that are already in a career, and there's this aspect of being a programmer, and all of you guys said that technology changes constantly. So what are the places that you go to keep yourself updated in the new things that are coming out, even if it's updates of compilers or syntax or new ways to do things? If you could share a little bit of your tool set with us. I'll start with you, Heather.
Sure. So COVID is actually something that has made that a lot easier for me, because all of these conferences have gone online. So it's really easy to attend all the conferences with everybody presenting their new technology that they made. And that's one really good way to keep up on it. Another thing is just taking a look at the changelogs when something changes. Even if it's just to skim over it and see what the new features are, even if you don't look further into that, it can really help you to know, what is this next thing that I need to research? Or when you come across it in your other research, know that you need to go a little bit further on it because it's going to get big soon.
No, that's great. It's true. A lot of the conferences are online now, and they're actually cheaper too.
And it's great. You don't have to fly out there, get a hotel, and you can just attend there online.
Yeah. And that makes the networking, Derek was mentioning, also easier. Daniel, for you, what are some of the places that you go to keep yourself updated?
I tend to read a lot of articles online related. A lot of it most times revolves around, I would say most time, but a lot of it revolves around what I'm working on at the time. But every now and then I notice something intriguing or different that it's picking up steam. For example, Rust, which is a new programming language, has kind of gotten into my radar, and I have yet to play around with it, but I already read some articles on Stack Overflow, for example, is one of the places that I kind of keep up with news. They have a blog every now and then with interesting articles that kind of got in my radar. But it's also impossible to think that you can keep up with everything. There's just so much that you're gonna overwhelm yourself thinking that you can keep up. So it's important to kind of have a focus or even know when to disregard or not kind of pay attention to some of these things. Otherwise, you're just gonna be going around the circles and not really doing much because there's just too much to keep up with.
That's great. And imagine some of the things also go away, never actually quite take off. It happens a lot in tech.
Well, I have an interesting comment on that one though.
Go ahead.
Well, before Flash actually died, way years before that, that was actually the beginning of my career. For some reason, I never really got into it, and I avoided it like the plague. And I just I don't really know why, but in hindsight, I'm glad I did. I'm sure like a lot of people actually did great things. Zynga, for that matter, actually started with Flash games on Facebook at the beginning, and then it was a technology heavily used. But on your comment about things going away, I'm glad that I kind of stayed away from that one because I didn't have to learn something, and it's one less thing that I learned and no longer have any use for.
You know, I actually have the same reaction that you. I never got into Flash either, never learned it. I avoided it. What did it for me was that it wasn't a real programming language. It was a time-based programming language. And and something really didn't sit well with me as to programming that it was thought of more as a movie than it was thought as an interactive application. And I said, this cannot last because eventually something's gonna break this paradigm and it's gonna be limiting. So this will go away. And it did. So I don't know if that did it for you, but that's what it did it for me.
No, I never really got into it. Even ActionScript, which is the actual programming language used in Flash, it just never appealed to me. At the time, I all wanted it the closer to the metal that I could stay, which is one of the reasons I got into game development. I really wanted to do console development back then. Was that like I just wanted to be closer to the metal and then squeeze the most out of the hardware. And web development was not that. It was in many ways the opposite of it. There are so many levels of abstraction that I just didn't want to get there.
That's awesome. Derek, for you, what are the places that you go to keep yourself updated and learn new things?
Sure. So WWDC, that's, I'm primarily iOS. So that's, I had to make sure that everybody knew that when WWDC was on, my productivity was going to drop a little bit because I wanted to be the first to see what was going on. Like Heather mentioned, that it was all digital online. A lot of the stuff, pretty much all the resources, those videos, you just spend time in the videos, just watch it. It'll only take you a week or so to get through all of it. Aside from that, there's a number of outlets like the Ray Wenderlich site, that beautiful tutorials on pretty much anything you want to do with mobile. They've expanded out to cover Android, Kotlin development, and I actually had given my personal account to don't say this to a couple of my employees so that they could learn Kotlin back when I was at Venue Next. But aside from that, Ray Wenderlich, CocoCast is another good outlet. Hacking with Swift. I'm almost at least once a week on that site, just checking out new stuff. Aside from that, I have a personal practice of being on the betas. I'm on iOS 14.2 beta 4 right now. And what that does is that encourages me to read the release notes, see the changes. It also encourages me to check the app against, future releases. And just trying to stay ahead. But like Daniel said, and there's so much stuff out there. You can't really learn it all. There's so many different things popping in and out. There's Google had a few things that was that was happening back in the day, and it never really came to fruition. And there's so many competing technologies right now. You really have no idea which one are going to survive. And then personally, in my professional career, I just try to stick to things that are relative to the immediate roadmap that the product that I'm supporting is actually going to support. So, looking ahead a couple months, seeing what's out there, and then doing whatever type of research I can that's relevant and practical for what I'm about to do.
What a cool conversation. So we have talked about various aspects of being developing for mobile, and but I see we have in the stream a few programmers, and so I'd like to ask each of you, what do you think most people don't know about what a mobile app can do? If you're a programmer of, let's say, databases, for banks, and you will be considering uh, uh, pursuing a career in mobile application, what would you tell a programmer like that, experienced programmer, of what mobile apps can do that people don't think about? I'll start with you, Daniel.
Oh man, I was hoping you'd put me last so I can think of more things. Well, one of them is it can measure your stride by simply putting the phone in your pocket. That's one. Just the slew of different sensors and the fact that you can reach anyone on the planet for all intents and purposes virtually free. There's cost involved with all the technology and services around it, but once you kind of go past that hump, then it's free, and that is amazing. It's a very liberating technology that we, for what it's worth, take it for granted, right? And then this idea of just be able to reach, which is a blessing and a curse at the same time if it's overused because of the whole information overload and whatnot. But that is still remarkable. The fact that it's ubiquitous. You mentioned there are 14 billion devices on the globe, right? And there are just countless things and more things to be discovered and invented and created as the time goes. We have 5G starting to roll out now with manufacturers releasing devices that have support for 5G. And I only wonder what sort of thing will come out of that, where there's, from what I understand, there's quite a bit of expectation or hopes that would be very transformational in the coming future.
Well, it's a great answer, Daniel. Super awesome. Derek, what do most people don't know about what it means to develop mobile apps, or what mobile apps can do?
Okay, so yeah, mobile apps. That's kind of hard because, again, there's power users, who pretty much follow everything, and they're on the bleeding edge. But I think a lot of it is, one, apps can learn you through machine learning and a lot of big data type of utilization. So that's one thing. It's just they can really hone in on who you are and where you want to go. They can, start anticipating the next things that you want. We see this a lot through, Siri and, on the Android phones. But one thing I wanted to kind of point out is that mobile apps really can only do what their operating system supports. So a lot of that functionality is intrinsic in the device itself, in the operating system itself. So the operating systems now can be a little creepy because they know you probably better than you know yourself. And like I was mentioning about that app Welltory, it said, yeah, dude, you had a long day, you worked out too hard, you need to take some deep breaths, and here's an exercise for you. And so it's, to some people it's cool because you almost have that friend who's looking out for you that you didn't even know was watching. And to other people it could be pretty creepy.
That's good. And Derek, I'm sorry, Heather, for you, what is something that most people don't know about what a mobile app can do?
I think that comes down to more what people don't think about. Now, like both of them said, like there's those sensors that are just not available to other types of programmers. But we talked a little bit about how important like the user experience is, that deep personal relationship, and that paired with the technology that we have there, we can do some really creative things that I think we're just now hitting the tip of the iceberg on how much we can really do with it. Stuff like I can put in my Chick-fil-A order at home, and then it automatically puts it into the restaurant when I pull up into the parking lot. Or my AC realizes I'm on the way home and turns down, so that way I don't have to waste the power while I'm gone, but it'll be cool enough by the time I get home. And just the little things like that, where we're just using a GPS signal. It's how it's used creatively, I think, is what most people don't think about. And I'm really excited to see, I'm just kind of like we talked about earlier, how much more as an industry we can come up with that, because we're barely hitting the tip of what can be done.
Well, that is actually a perfect segue to my next question, and it's usually the last question as we I get into the end today, because I love asking this question to technologists every time we do this show. Technology changes a lot, and right now we're in a very interesting time for technology. We have it's about 50 years of accelerated innovation in technology, and technologies that started developing 20, 30 years ago all get into their peak adoption at the same time. So you got artificial intelligence with machine learning, and you have fast internet or fast connectivity, 5G, and mobile devices, and visualization devices. All these things getting kind of at the same time to the same place, and uh, allows you to think about solving problems you couldn't solve before. And I, for one, think that it's a new revolution of technology. It's the revolution of solving real complex and important problems of the world. But for you, what do you see in technology today that gets you really excited about the future? Um, this time, I think Danielle looks like he has a better answer, and the other ones are looking up. So I'll start with Danielle. What do you see in technology today that gets you really excited about the future?
I'm always excited with technology and the prospects of what it can do, right? With the current in development, new promises are very exciting. You go from all the, at least here in the Bay Area, there's a lot of talk of autonomous vehicles. And that's one that I'm really interested to see how it's going to pan out. You have, with the new devices, for example, Agar now coming out with, I mentioned 5G. The other one that really I thought was really interesting, that the high-end new iPhones, they come with the LiDAR in it. The LiDAR is actually the same equipment that some of these car company or the self-driving companies use in their cars to make the cars see around them, see their surroundings. So the fact that Apple now embedded that device in their phones is very interesting, and I'm intrigued to see what sort of new application and functionality will come out of that. And if I were to guess, most likely other Android devices will if there are already any with that same functionality, I wouldn't be surprised if in the near future they come out with a similar functionality to provide the same thing, because they're all trying to competing head to head to see who has the feature that is unique to their platform until the other one catches up. But that one more and that I'm looking forward to is SpaceX's mesh of satellites to provide internet access. That's another one that I'm very interested in, see how it pans out.
Those are great examples. Thank you, Daniel. Uh, Derek, for you, what do you see in technology today that gets you really excited about the future?
Oh man, there's a lot of signals if you look at them of what's about to happen. But 5G, I'm waiting for 5G to actually really hit because that will enable streaming and just remote computation to be much more robust. And then I think a lot of it too is you kind of mentioned that like all of these technologies are really kind of peaking together, and what I'm excited to see is the fusion of all these technologies, into one, or like a single application. I was just thinking about like what 5G could do to AR. You could have so much more than than what you currently can do. Of course, AI is something that is constantly improving. Uh, and then I was thinking about how Apple is actually allowing for access to the shortcuts and basically creating automation and really just bridging multiple applications together. So I think the fusion of all these technologies coming into one, and then especially just having it in the pocket of your in your front pocket. So it's going to be crazy, but it's going to be fun, and I can't wait to see it all come together.
Thank you, Derek. And Heather, you have final word. What do
Hi.
you see in technology today that gets you really excited about the future?
There are so many things, but I think one of the biggest ones right now is the way that the interactions are progressing, because we went from having desktops that you had to go sit down at a table to use your computer. Now we have these handhelds and we're moving on to wearables. So what's going to be next? I mean, we've already seen augmented reality glasses. We already have watches that can check your stride and things like that. And the way that all of those things are progressing to create new technologies that we haven't even thought about yet, I think is just really awesome. And then that with the way that technology is expanding, because when I was a kid, coding would be the weird thing to do, right? Like I was the nerdy kid and I was okay with that. But nowadays, my daughter is 10 years old and she's already learning how to code. And all of her peers at school are like, oh, wow, that's so cool. You made an app. And she's going to be having an app out on the Play Store here in just a couple months. And she's 10. So when I think about that new generation that's learning all this stuff, and we're still on the cutting edge of it, 20 years from now, when those kids that are just now learning it are really getting into their prime of being innovative, how much cool stuff are we going to have that we can't even imagine right now? I mean, that's like seeing an airplane back in the olden times. I have no idea what it's going to be, but I know it's going to be awesome.
That is super cool. I'm like you. I get really excited about the new generation. I get really excited of the problems they're gonna get to solve. And so it's fantastic what's coming on. I'm very excited to see it. So thank you very much, Daniel, Heather, and Derek, for taking time to be with us. We all get the same 24 hours, so we're very thankful that you took this 1 hour with us of your very busy days. Thank you very much, and see you soon.